All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Happy to welcome back friend of the show, Mike Murphy, famed Republican strategist, co-host of Hacks on Tap. Mike Murphy, great to see you.
Hey, Matt, good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Let's jump into it. Donald Trump, from my perspective, is doing a bunch of stuff that seems destined to fail, to not make him popular. Tariffs being one example, likely to raise prices. Is there a method to the madness? What is his end game from your perspective?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that are true about Trump. He's very good on the outside attacking. He's terrible on the inside running the government and then defending. So if you look at his pattern, he runs as a challenger and essentially an open seat, beats Hillary Clinton, a weak candidate, comes into office, not so good, gets beat by Joe Biden, kind of a weak candidate, then runs again from the outside, everything's screwed up, just a complete attack machine, and wins again. And now he's back in government screwing up again. The offer he made the voters was pretty simple. When I was president, the economy was better. Remember, this guy she is a pawn of the old senile guy. And so the power of the electorate was pretty much fire the Biden administration, which she was seen as an extension of. I thought she was new enough that if she had not gone on The View and said, I'm exactly like Biden, she might have been able to pull it off. And in the popular vote, it was pretty close. But still, it was more about firing the Biden folks than it was about embracing Trump, who's never had great polling numbers. So he gets into office, and I think instead of thinking, okay, I've now got to manage the economy well to keep the promise that got me elected. That's my key to popularity. With some of my Trumpian cultural war, I'm not going to put up with all this left-wing wokeism, and I'm not going to defend the police and some of the stuff that works really well politically. Instead of that plan, he said, okay, I'm going to get even with a lot of people, including every lawyer who ever looked at me funny, every prosecutor. I'm going to make a huge power grab. I'm going to find a megalomaniac super donor and turn him loose to monkey around with the agency with a bunch of interns in the clumsiest way possible, knowing that people like the macro theme of cutting waste out of government. It's a home run. It's a 70-30 issue. But when you do it with a blind chimp and a chainsaw, you're going to find out why government is so bloated. People kind of like bloated government. They hate the idea of bloated government, but when it comes to getting their whatever, they form follows function. Government looks the way it is because that's the electorate it serves. The electorate rewards, don't tax me, but spend on me, or cut somebody else's taxes. Cut somebody else's spending, cut my taxes. So, it's not been the most skillful plan. He's not working on the thing he promised he'd do. Instead, he's doing policies that lead to chaos and trouble and alienate the political constituencies that fuel the big bloated government. That's one. And second, Donald Trump, I don't believes in very much other than himself. He's been a Democrat, he's been a Republican, he's pro-choice, he's pro-life. Who knows what he believes other than survival and vengeance. And I'd say tariffs. It seems to be the one policy thing, as epically stupid as it is, that he actually believes. So now he's on this ricocheting course of cleaning up or soon to be cleaning up after Elon, power grab war with everybody, a potential constitutional crisis with the judiciary, insane grievance politics, Caldeo dictator-like instincts to turn the Justice Department into a weapon of vengeance, and a fanatical obsession with blowing up the Atlantic Alliance that's kept peace since World War II, while starting a massively destructive trade war with our closest allies and biggest trading partners here in North America. So it's almost like the Chinese communists and super democratic partisans got together and built Trump in a laboratory to blow the midterm elections and help China achieve parity superpower status around the world. So it is a horrible train crash to watch, but it certainly is not any kind of sophistication. And I just tagged that by saying he also made a big mistake. When you're president, you appoint a cabinet, you're sending some political messages. but you also want a bunch of tough, savvy operators to keep the cabinet agencies from screwing stuff up that you as president are blamed for. And instead, he cleaned out the Fox green room, and let's put it this way. It's not a bunch of Mensa applicants or Nobel Prize winners there. I think the average IQ of a Trump cabinet secretary is in the mid-90s, with a few exceptions. And so they're not going to be good at running their agencies. The uniformed military is going to run circles around Pete Hegseth. And the intelligence agencies, which hate to share anyway, are just going to make a monkey out of Tulsi Gabbard because they don't think she, is trustworthy anyway, and they've got a case. So instead of having cabinet agencies designed to protect him through competence, he's got this clown circus. So on every level, yes, I think the laws of political gravity are going to catch up with Donald Trump in office the way they did in his last term.
Interesting. Okay.
Sorry for the long answer, but
No,
it's a fairly complicated train wreck operating on about 8 levels at once.
good stuff. And we're starting to see, look, reports of Trump voters who are losing their jobs, veterans in some cases, people who flew Trump flags who've been fired, a guy who voted for Trump whose wife has been detained by ICE. And then we're seeing these town hall meetings and Harriet
Yeah, well, they can't
Hageman in
even have them
Wyoming.
anymore. I've been in politics 40 years. I've never seen a dictate come out, even in the worst days of the 82 midterms. That's how old I am. It's when I got started. Saying, whatever you do, don't hold a town meeting in your safe Republican district. That's pretty bad.
But based on the evidence, it's good advice based on
Well,
what
it's
we're
good
seeing.
tactics, but that's kind of like, if you're on the deck of the Titanic, we recommend you don't put lead weights in your pockets. It's good advice in the moment, but in the larger context, it's a show of weakness.
So if you were sitting down with Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer or whoever is the de facto leader of the Democratic Party, what advice does Mike Murphy give them today?
Well, one, I would say stop being a bunch of identity politics sociology professors trying to inflict your views on the working middle class, because how many times do they have to kick your ass to show you it doesn't sell? Don't fall for the Republican culture war stuff. The smartest Democratic line I've heard in the last year came from Mike Duggan, who's he's the mayor of Detroit, very successful one. He's a career Democrat who's running as an independent now for governor of Michigan. And in his launch video, he had a great line about being mayor of Detroit. He said, "The Democratic Party, served my whole life, came to me and demanded that I defund the police. Well, I gave the cops a raise and we cut crime in Detroit by 30%. You tilt against that stuff. That's where the
Mm.
votes are. You don't fall for the thing. I just don't know if they're capable of that. You look at who they elected DNC chairman in the D trip, where they're bragging a lot about how they pick vendors based on skin color, not on, necessarily purely on competence. Anyway, a lot of that is in their DNA and they can't shake it. So it becomes loosely in the football, and these culture war fights, they keep losing. The other thing I tell them strategically, and I think Carville's given the same advice, is when in doubt, go to the best general of World War II, General Zhukov of the Red Army, who, when the Germans attacked with overwhelming force, they did a fighting retreat. They cost a lot of German blood, but they kept backing up, waiting for winter, knowing that was the
Mhm.
biggest force ever. The Democrats have some big things coming that'll be moments for them, and they've got to plan backwards from those. They have the Virginia governor's race, so in this year, and they have a strong candidate. Well, the Republicans are not necessarily going to have a strong candidate. Doesn't look like it. So what does that mean? It means they're going to have a win. So if it's a referendum on Trump, and you got a lot of federal employees in Northern Virginia, it's going to be a sign of huge weakness for Trump, which the insecure, touchy Trump administration will overreact to, which will destabilize them more. And then you got the midterms next year, which the Democrats, if they even half get their act together, are going to win. So you've got, it's like you have great ambushes coming. Prepare for them. The most important thing right now for Hakeem Jeffries is the DCCC. They've got to turn that into the best committee they've ever had, starting with campaign recruitment right now. So they max out their opportunity in the midterms. So they need to look at the wider picture. Now, tactically, finally, in addition to not falling for culture war fights, and focusing on, hey, what happened to that economy Trump made worse, not better, they've got to have a unified voice. And it should not be Chuck Schumer, who is also designed in a lab to be an ineffective Democratic spokesperson. And it shouldn't be the squad, because then they're going to fall for all the culture wars. So they've got some young star members, and they ought to put them in the window frame. Marie Goosecamp, I'm going to mispronounce her name, and I apologize, from Washington State, who basically runs the transmission shop, is terrific. She ought to be famous. She ought to be on Kimmel. They just seem to lack communications people know how to play the big piano to do some star making of new generation Democrats. So some fixable stuff. But right now, you got a new DNC chair who's, that was a high school election. It was all kind of rigged, voting for their pals, but who wants to play the old losing hits. So not uncommon, by the way, in a party out of power, because you don't have a White House to put the whip out and influence and control everybody. So you have kind of crazy 20 warlords running around. But they need to take the longer view, understand the strategic retreat, but fix their problem and get out of the identity politics business, which may be impossible for them.
So I had an LA Times column last week, and you've hit two of my four things.
Yeah.
I said these are the four things that
I stole them from you.
Well, I think it's great minds think alike. These are not these are not proprietary. So one of them is don't be so woke, and then you mentioned sort of having a star, someone who's charismatic, someone who's authentic, someone who does not come across as out of touch. And you mentioned Congresswoman from Washington State, and you and I agree that Chuck Schumer is a human shrug, who's not a great spokesman or leader, right, for the current era. Can you think of any other sort of rising stars on the horizon that Democrats might turn to?
I think some of their governors are great, who normally are smart and stay out of Washington politics, but they have some new generation stars there. The guy from Maine in that tough district who wins the Republican district, I'm blanking on his name. There are some, and stars don't happen; stars are made. You set them up to have them make themselves stars. Right now, they're doing follow the system. I remember that rally they did with a bunch of 80-year-olds waving their canes with Schumer in the middle of it. I mean, it was the enemy of television.
What are the ingredients that you would look for if you were looking for rising stars in the Democratic Party?
Ability to communicate a message and ability to believe that the main thing the Democrats exist to do is protect the middle class on meat and potato issues, economic stuff. The cost of eggs, the cost of gas, the cost of life, the cost of drugs for your parents. And to say that the Trumpian revenge orgy is hurting your ability to live your daily life. Runaway Elon is pretty good, although Elon's not on the ballot. His numbers are sinking fast. He's going to an anchor around Trump. The problem with attacking Elon all the time is Trump can cut him loose.
Right.
And he will. I have no doubt that's going to end badly. It's just a question of time. But the idea, and I'd start doing old and feeble on Trump a little. So what the Trump guys, one of the reasons they're going off in 100 directions is their performative theory of the election is we're the strong guy. So we're going to push Canada around. We're going to push everybody around, those foreigners, A. And B, every day a lightning bolt. I'm action man. All right, it's 4:00. Now in the Department of Commerce, we can never say the word tariff or tax or French fry or whatever. They're just constantly, half of these EOs, executive orders, are like press releases just to stir up the daily news cycle. So there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it, but it looks like action, vigor. When it turns into meltdown, collapse, your brother, the Bronze Star winner, just got laid off at the forestry department. And it turns out we've laid off 100 baby food inspectors and nuclear bomb guards and our best government physicists. Now, that's what you really want. A bunch of suddenly out of work nuclear bomb designers who can't pay for the mortgage or the kids' school anymore. I wonder what they're going to want to do freelance to survive. So anyway, take all these disasters and link it to people's lives getting worse. So all of a sudden, maybe Trump is the senile old guy who's not up to it. So he outsourced the job to Elon Musk, who's crazy and made his fortune on government subsidy, by the way. The real money made by Tesla was never the car business until very recently, and now it's imploding. The money made by Tesla was selling credits to other car companies so they could meet emission standards because they didn't make enough emission-free cars. Tesla made more than they had to, so they could sell that credit for cash for billions of dollars, all profit to the other automakers. So, Musk is basically the corporate welfare king. So anyway, I think there are a lot of ways as this grows old by having stars who are under 100, by the way, another problem in the Democratic Party. So it's not Pelosi, it's not Schumer, but people in their 40s, 30s, early 50s who are articulate and look like change, new Democrats who are talking about the problems you have in life in America. And on another level, going at him on all this international chaos he's creating.
Do you think,
The
could you
guy is
run
an
ads?
enemy to Reagan defense policy. That's why I joined the cause. First thing I did in politics as a chair, or maybe then I was vice chair of the Georgetown University College Republicans in the early 80s, went out and got, in trouble in front of the Soviet embassy protesting. That's why I joined. And now we're working for him, So I think there's a fertile ground for attack there. The abandonment of Ukraine, the sucking up the bad guys, be they North Korea, obviously Putin. It starts to make Trump a dupe and a fool, which I think is kryptonite for him over time because he's not delivering. He's not competent. He can't run anything. How did he make his fortune? The old fashioned way. He inherited it. Those are things that need to bubble to the top as people take a second look at Trump in office.
What would let's assume like the midterms are 2 weeks from now.
Right.
What kind of ads? And obviously we don't have polling and all of that, but just sort of,
Are you
uh,
better off?
back of the
How you doing
napkin.
2 years later? What happened?
Well,
You're paying a Trump tax. A pickup truck that costs 71 grand now costs 95. It's a tax of 4 to 10 grand on every vehicle. And the way the North American, just to do my auto stuff for a minute, parts go to Canada and back and to Mexico and back. They cross the border, some of them 3-4 times. We're going to hit them with a tax
right.
every time. And see, the problem with tariffs are people at first glance saying, well, wait a minute, we put tariff on foreign stuff or make more stuff here. And that's an attractive idea. And I'm generally for it. But the way economics actually work is when you slap a tariff on Canadian aluminum, which is, a significant part, I think at least 25% of the aluminum that we use in the US, because the Canadians have a lot of cheap power. You need a lot of electricity to make aluminum. That's why Alcoa was in Tennessee at the TVA and their big plant. Anyway, the aluminum comes in, you put 25% on it. It's on its way to an auto company or somebody making appliances. So all of a sudden, 25% for something that uses a lot of steel and aluminum is significant cost. People think, well, they're just call U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh and buy it there. Well, guess what? They raise their prices 25 or even might do 24% the next day because that's the new price of aluminum. And now there'll be shortages because they don't have enough capacity to make up for what the Canadians were selling us. Well, build a new aluminum factory. Good luck. 10 years. So as prices go up, demand goes down and people get laid off. And, it's a vicious spiral, which is why we've proven every time big tariffs, not surgical tariffs, but big tariffs are an economic disaster. So I think Trump's going to learn some economics 101. I think he was at the Bone Spur Clinic freshman year in college, didn't get the course, but it's going to hurt him. And weirdly enough, he's hurting his own voters. We took a look at the 35 congressional districts that have the most spending on new factories, which are popping up everywhere in America to build batteries that we don't want to buy from China and electric vehicles. It's about 170,000 jobs, a lot of money, 35 congressional districts. Of those 35 congressional districts, 28 of them are Republican. That's where the workers are in the new Rivian plant, 8,000 employees that Trump is trying not to build. To Ford Blue Oval, a massive complex in Tennessee that Trump wants to kill. So not only is he creating economic pain and the political price he'll pay, he's doing it to his own voters. And you
What do
see
you
it, the
think of the
agricultural
idea?
tariff,
Take it,
on
if
and on it
someone
goes.
was willing to do this, they might not be, but say a Trump voter, veteran, feels authentic. goes into, looks at a camera and says, I had my job at the VA after
Right.
serving in Iraq, and I voted for Donald Trump 3 times, and then Elon Musk fired. He put Elon Musk in charge, and he fired me from my
Right.
job. You know, would that be compelling, or what do you?
Yeah, yeah, no, anything about the pain of the failures. Where the Democrats make a mistake is you don't want to defend the status quo. I mean, you don't want to say, oh, the government's perfect, there's no waste. People think a third of government spending is waste, which, frankly isn't true, but there is a lot of waste. It is there. Part of it is the voters like it that way. They tend to like programs, and they like inefficient programs, and they like pork. They like having Navy bases in states that have no water anywhere nearby because the local congressman wants the base.
I'm in
There's a
West
U.S.
Virginia. We have a Coast Guard base in West Virginia, a landlocked state.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. The
Robert's the
pirates
bird.
could, come flying in. The U.S. military, I believe, is the world's fourth or maybe third largest operator of golf courses. So, yeah, there's plenty to target. Some of it has a constituency. Um, but so the Democrats, you don't want to defend the status quo. You want to argue for smarter change. And I've, my advice, at least on the podcast where I bloviate this kind of stuff, Hacks on Tap with me and Axelrod and John Heilman time to time too. I say they ought to set up a Dem Doge. Like Trump ordered Kristi Noem, another IQ 91 cabinet secretary, to spend $200 million of your tax dollars, $200 million on an ad campaign thanking him for securing the border.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty dogy to me. I can think of other things to do with $200 million.
I
Or
like that.
Secret
Yeah.
Service agents staying at expensive hotel rooms at Mar-a-Lago, or the other ways that Trump drifts a lot of stuff. So let's go play the Doge game, but smarter, and put a point of the knife on the Trump ridiculous wasteful spending.
I love that idea.
Karen Bass here in LA, every TV station is screaming peak fire season. The White House, this is Biden, not Trump, but the White House says, hey, we really need you to go to Ghana for the inauguration of the president. It's the superpower of Ghana. So she leaves the city, gets on a commercial plane from LA to DC. Then they jump in a government car and they go to Andrews Air Force Base, and she gets on an Air Force Gulfstream, which flies her direct to Ghana, cost the taxpayers probably about $100,000. And she got out of the plane. Somebody said, hey, your city's on fire. And she immediately, now they keep saying military plane. Yeah, it was a military Gulfstream. So she's flying Air Tom Cruise on the tax dollar of the hard-pressed U.S. taxpayer. She flies back for another $100,000 to Andrews and then takes commercial back. So there's plenty of doji stuff out there that's legit. It's not randomly having interns show up at an agency, get a hold of the payroll computer, and throw a monkey wrench into it. USAID, one, you don't save that much money. We have $500 million. Talk about Dem Doge. We have $500,000 approximately of U.S. agricultural products purchased from American farmers, rotting on the docks a short truck ride away from starving kids. And it's rotting there because we froze those. By the way, a lot of tears were shed over the USAID thing, and Marco knows this. He's just gutless, won't talk about it, by the intelligence agencies. Because every once in a while, that nice-looking guy in the khaki safari jacket at the dock in the hellhole unloading the American water pumps, and the local El Supremo sends some goons in to steal 2 or 3 of them for the palace. Don't think they're not agency people, and it's a great way to find out where El Supremo is hanging out when he starts stealing the flat screens and the good food. So it was also part of the intelligence world and soft power. So now the Chinese move in. So I'm sorry, I'm ranting on. You can tell
I'm
I need my
totally
Trump
with you.
therapy here, but it's
I mean,
so relentlessly stupid.
I agree. I'm sure you saw the movie Charlie Wilson's War based on the book.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, there's a scene where after they win the Cold War, and Soviets withdraw from Afghanistan, Tom Hanks is, Charlie Wilson's trying to get some committee to appropriate like $1 million to build a school and dig a
Mhm.
couple wells in Afghanistan, and they won't do it. They won't spend the
Right.
money, and he's like, you know what's going to happen now, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
No, the voters hate foreign aid. The thing is, foreign aid, one, there's so much less of it than they think. And two, it's power. It's power. You go to the Chinese now, you're an African or you're somewhere of resources. You know, you're in an African country, you've got some rare earth minerals maybe, and you're poor. The Chinese will come in and give you a cell phone system. And cell phone systems are important because those countries can't afford to string wire and they don't need to with cell phones because it's a data modem. You can do a lot on a smartphone. So they'll give you a cell phone system for a handshake and $50. Now they bug it and they control it remotely, but that's soft power. And we decided not to be in that game because we need 200 million to run ads with Trump doing superhero moves by the border.
are you with me that look? I mean, I don't want to campaign. You have multiple messaging. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. But in terms of the most important thing, would you agree that for Democrats, talking about rising prices and the economy is more important than talking about the preservation of liberal democracy, which you and I
Completely,
probably see as even more important than the economy, obviously. But
completely.
do you agree from a political standpoint that the democracy message feels too esoteric for a lot of Americans?
Well, here's the problem with the democracy halo message. The Dems love to use it because they can say we're better people than you because we're saving democracy. Well, you're a bigoted red state idiot, who voted for a fat reality star con man, and that makes them feel great. It's virtue signaling. Here's the problem: you take a poll, is protecting democracy a big issue? And people say it is. And then you look at the crosstabs, and a lot of Republicans say protecting democracy is a big issue. They mean the deep state and Hunter
Right.
Biden and
Protecting
Vince
democracy.
Foster and right. They think
Yeah.
Trump is saving democracy from the
Right.
woke Stapo. And over on the Democratic side, everybody wants to lecture their own voters like a sociology professor. That's Carville's line about, we got to stop letting our party be led by the NYU sociology faculty lounge. And he's right. So, yes, the democracy debate is in the eye of the beholder. We're too far gone that the whole country agrees. There are two sides and they're dug in. So, get to the stuff people deal with every day. I like to say the most meaningful political relationship most Americans have is once a week at the cash register. That's why inflation is such a president killer. And if Trump does this tariff stuff, we'll have Trumpflation. That ought to be famous. Democrats ought to say that every day. We ought to have Dem Doge. Look at all the Trump waste. What a bunch of incompetent fools. And on we go. We ought to have the Trump price index, the Trump tax on everything you buy, tariffs or taxes. Start getting into alliteration. Start getting into not smart stuff. Do I want to debate about, my God, they cut $36 million in 918 employees out of the import export? No. They fired 200 baby food inspectors. So every mom in America looks at the baby food and wonders.
Hmm.
The best thing we had Steve Israel used to run the D Trip, former member from Long Island, smart Paul, talking about kind of the midterms and everything last week on Hacks on Tap. And I asked him something that I said, I believe this to you. And he agreed with me. The best thing the Democrats can do is to raise the wrong track. The number that we watch in politics are things in the country on the right track, or have they gotten pretty seriously off on the wrong track? When wrong track is high, people fire incumbents, particularly presidents. So right now, the wrong track when Trump got elected was in the low 50s, slight majority wrong track. It's been creeping up. Push it to 65.
Mm.
Because for the first month, Trump can say, Biden's fault. I'm cleaning up the mess. Give it 150 days, Trump owns it. Trump is the status quo. And so
What
it
can
goes from
Democrats
fire
do?
Biden to fire Trump, which is very capable of doing. But
Do we?
economics is what drives that, not cultural spats with secular elites telling people who work with their hands they're wrong to own a gun responsibly, or they're wrong to not understand that gender rights are at the top of the national issue agenda.
So should Democrats like sabotage, shut down the government to drive up the wrong
I want to
track, or
shut down the government. It's a tough call. I get Schumer's position, but higher wrong track, good for our democracy, bad for Trump. What's bad for Trump is good for democracy. So even though if you look at when Newt did it, when these happen, everybody gets blamed. Everybody's numbers go down, and the human cost is a real thing. But I would have called Trump's bluff. Excuse me, Trump's bluff. Um, and they can do it again in September when we're going to be back on this movie after Trump's deeper in the hole. But I would have had a Democratic CR and say it funds all the same stuff and there are no culture war fights in here. But the big difference is no more Elon and we protect defense and there's some money for cops or something that's an offense issue in there. This is the CR we're vote for. That's your CR. It's an Elon runs wild, crazy CR. We're not going to vote for it. And I'd make it a two-way question, and I wouldn't be afraid to shut down the government and let Trump have the hot foot.
so you think the midterms are poised to be good for Democrats? I
Yeah,
think
unless
it's
they totally screw up, which they're capable of.
yeah.
I mean, this is the
So
party that thought Kamala Harris from no primary was a great idea.
you and I think we both agree taking the House seems pretty obvious. Do you think Democrats actually have a chance of taking back the Senate, or is it just the
Well,
map's too hard?
the Senate is all down to the map of which seats are up, and there are a lot of safe Republican seats up. There are very few vulnerable seats, but the expectations are such Democrats can't do anything. They get one good upset, and they win the House, and they won the Virginia governor's race. Then the narrative is set. So, do I think they can win control of the Senate? They can, but I bet heavily they won't. But can they exceed expectations and have an upset winner? A Democratic rodeo announcer in a fluke election here won X. It can happen, and I think it might. You need kind of a perfect storm, but some of the ingredients are on their way. Like I was looking at the House races, and I was talking to somebody about the top Democratic targets. And I said, here's a perfect example Michigan 10th District, mostly Macomb County, the old Reagan Democrats. It's a Republican +3 district. John James holds it now. James is ambitious. I think he's looking at the Senate race. It could be an open seat. That is a car district. The steel and aluminum tariffs and what Trump is doing to slaughter electric vehicles, of which, by the way, there are 50,000 new EV manufacturing jobs just in Michigan, could flip that district. So I think the Democrats should play wide on the House. Even with all the redistricting that we don't have as many swing districts, I think they could have double-digit wins, which would be very meaningful.
What books, thinkers, or historical events have had the biggest impact on your life?
Wow, that is a great question. I have to think about it. I'm a foreign affairs nerd. So Harold Nicholson's History of the Congress of Vienna got me interested in diplomacy. And I like certain political memoirs. I find I'm a Lloyd George fan in UK politics, ultimate pragmatist. Of course, I'm a Churchill nut. Um, I could name 100 things like that really really affected me. As far as historical stuff, the history of the Cold War,
Mm-hmm.
very important, and the Progressive Era is interesting in American history. European diplomatic history interests me a lot.
So, like, you
I
didn't
was a
say
Russian
like
area
I was
studies guy
most
in college,
influenced.
so
You didn't
Russian
say like
Revolution.
Lee Atwater or something.
Oh,
You're
okay, political hacks.
no,
Well,
no, no, no,
I,
no, no, no. What
yeah,
I'm saying is, uh, you you are well grounded in literature and in foreign policy. Was that common for top Republican strategists, or most of them very nuts and bolts as opposed to ideas?
I don't know. I've never really looked at it that way. I mean, Rove is a big historian. Ailes had a great kind of theatrical gut. Before his demons caught up with him. Uh, I've met a lot of interesting people in politics, but I haven't really tried to. I've seen them from all different backgrounds. I'm just a weirdo. I mean, I can talk about obscure science fiction movies. I'm a movie nut. I'm a history nut. If you look over my shoulder there, right about here, those are the old Soviet cipher codes from their version of the Enigma machine I got on eBay for $100. We would have gone through anything in 1959 to get a hold of those. So, I have eclectic weirdo interests, and maybe that makes me a little different than the average political type. I've never really fit into boxes very well.
Has it
And I
ever
do a lot
come?
of stuff. I'm a screenwriter in Hollywood. I'm a nut for electric vehicles. I still advise some candidates quietly. I've written jokes for comedians. Well, my problem is the enemy of my life is getting bored. So I'm always trying new things to stay interested. I don't really, frankly, at my age, and now with my anti-Trump stuff, I'd be a problem and they wouldn't hire me anymore. But I'm not really interested in an Indiana governor's race again.
Right.
Done a lot of them, loved every minute of it, but I'm on to kind of new things. Like my idea of fun is to get into an EV and drive across the country and stop in Kansas at the world's largest steam shovel and climb around that for a while because I like mechanical things. So I'm a weird duck. I can't really, explain other people. There are other weird ducks in this business. The truth is, in political consulting, it attracts weird ducks of different flavors, I think.
Yeah, eccentric, interesting people. I mean, because I think a lot of the kind of rank and file staffers are, they're the kind of guys on their BlackBerry at the Capitol Hill Club. They're actually not that interesting. But the top level strategists, a lot of them are idiosyncratic and
Well, I
we
think the modern phrases are a little bit on the spectrum.
yes.
My wife accuses me of that. I think I'm fine, but I now have an incredible compulsive need to work on this Rubik's Cube here. So yeah, it's a business for if you are a self-starter and you're not an idiot and you have some hustle to you, it's kind of a wide open Wild West where you can, and there's more corruption in it now, I think, than when the last generation coming up. But I was in business, you either win or you're going to die. You can
Hmm.
lose a couple, but you better win most of the time. And it's kind of a meritocracy,
Yeah.
which lets the eccentric weirdos kind of be successful.
Well, it's like
Like
being
I
a
would have
football
lasted
coach.
20 minutes as a General Electric management trainee with the suit and the white tie and everything. I would have gone out of my mind. So this weird business, at least historically, now you got to do a blood oath to Donald Trump and check half your IQ at the door in the Republican politics, or be really good at having a rich internal life where you hate yourself.
Mm.
But for most of us, talented, creative weirdos, the Arthur Finkelsteins of the world, who was a very talented, creative weirdo, and I can name a bunch. It was kind of a haven where they could be successful because people would look around, Pat Caddell, their quirks, because they found this weird kind of version of strategy and show business and theater that all fit together in American politics. So I'm very grateful I stumbled into it. I would have done this or pure Hollywood probably, but I couldn't figure out how to do pure Hollywood, and my passion was politics. I mean, I dropped out of college to do this. I did my first congressional campaign out of my dorm room, and thank God the guy won. So that was, and so I'm officially a junior at Georgetown University.
I love it.
Yeah,
Well,
it's been fun.
awesome, man. Okay, last question. I'll get you out of here on this one. What daily habits or routines do you follow that help keep you sane and keep you sharp?
Um, I'm a social cat. And as my tailor would tell you, I love to eat lunch. But I try to at least twice a week go to lunch alone, which I know a lot of people hate. I like to go to a little dive restaurant in Culver City. It's been around 50 years called Hughes, Hus. Uh, and my friend Kevin runs it, Kevin Hugh. Check it out, America. And I bring my Kindle, love my Kindle, and I have a 90-minute lunch, which drives my staff crazy because I won't talk to anybody. The cell phone is off, and I read. I read a lot, period. I love airplane trips. I can read unmolested. But time quietly to think and read is very important because we're all caught up in the little minutia every day. One of my favorite historical stories, and then I'll stop wearing out your ears here, was I was reading the George Kennan biography, one of the great diplomats in the Soviet world and all that. And he remembered after World War II, he was a young, bright guy in the State Department, and he had served in Moscow, so he was seen as kind of a Russia expert, even though he was like 28. So General Marshall, who had been kind of the grand military supremo during World War II, master organizer, master talent spotter, was now Secretary of State. And so he pulled like 7 of the smartest young 20-somethings and early 30-year-olds in the State Department. He locked them all in the room. And he walked in, Kennan was one of them, and said, boys, Europe is starving. When people are starving, they turn communist. We can't have that. You got a week. Solve the problem. And he walked out, and they were all like having a stroke. Like, how the hell are we going to? And he pops his head and he says, I'll give you one bit of advice. Avoid trivia. And off he went. And that is true. You can get far in life by avoiding trivia. We spend most of our time on trivia. I'm on campaign calls where what font should we have on the bumper sticker? A readable one. And if you call me of something that small again, you're fired. You learn how to zero in on the key stuff. And the other thing, what reason I read a lot is the world's always changing. So you try to think about what's coming next. You can't predict how it's going to turn out. A lot of things turn out differently, but the big trends are identifiable. Like if I was running an auto company now, and I know some of these guys, I think, and women, I think they may be thinking this. If we do all decide that we want to own a car that after we get out of it, instead of being parked 23 hours a day, it can go out and make a living as a robo-taxi and then come back. The tech will come, and Tesla's making a big bet on this. And though I don't love their tech, but if that happens, the car market will shrink because so many people will use transportation as a service. So an industry that's making 16 million cars a year now in North America, or selling them, may only sell 9 million, 8 million, 6 million cars. So if you're running General Motors, you got to think about that. And you got about 15 years to figure it out. So everything is changing, and having time to think about that, not, hey, the plant in Lima, Ohio is having trouble with the casting machine. It is an important self-discipline. When I was doing the Jeb Super PAC, I went down to see Ray Hunt, one of the Hunt brothers, the smartest of them, the one who really built the business empire. And he had given us $1 million, I think $2 million actually. And I said, I want to have a council of major donors, small one, and that has to approve any expense over 100K, because these super PACs are often very unsupervised. And you have your own audit firm, because we're not gonna have the usual political vendor horseshit here. Will you do that job? You convene a budget meeting once every 2 weeks, and you're the chairman of this thing, and you have 3 or 4 other people with you. And he said, well, I studied calculus in school, son. Courtly Texan, good guy. And he said, I have one rule in business. And I'm at the 23rd floor of his glass skyscraper in Dallas, Hunt Energy, Hunt Worldwide, the world's largest ranch, mega empire spanning the world. You walk through the lobby, there are 20 plasmas live from all the Hunt stuff, power towers in the Andes. It's crazy. It's like a Bond villain headquarters. Anyway, Ray looked at me and he said, I don't make any decision in less than 24 hours. I'll call you at noon tomorrow. That was it. And I was impressed by that, because Ray Hunt's a guy who knows how to avoid trivia.
I love it. All right. Always a pleasure. That's great stuff.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Mike Murphy, thanks, man.
Thank you.